Hi, my love. Welcome to the Gemma Hanley podcast. My name is Gemma. I'm your host. This is the space where I have honest conversations about overcoming anxiety and overwhelm so that you can calm your nervous system and feel really confident and happy and calm from within yourself. Along the way, I share my own stories of holistically healing 23 years of anxiety and depression myself. And so if you're a woman seeking answers to perfectionism, people-pleasing, burnout, resistance, you may love, you're in the right place. Let's do it. Let's begin. And before we begin, I want to pay my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I am recording from, which is the Gubbi Gubbi tribe. And I want to extend that acknowledgement to their elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as anybody of Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander heritage watching this replay. Welcome back to the potty, lady love. I have a very fun, vibrant, passionate guest speaker here on the podcast for us today. I've got Sheridan with us, who is a qualified gut health nutritionist with a master's in nutrition and postgraduate studies in functional diagnostic nutrition. She not only has the head knowledge, but as we love, Sheridan has also experienced gut symptoms firsthand. She's walked the talk. She's lived the pain and learnt the lessons firsthand herself. Having spent years battling chronic gut pain, IBS, bloating, missing periods, and food intolerances, she is passionate about helping others to get to the root cause of their symptoms. Welcome.
Yay! It's a pleasure to be here and to be on your podcast, which is super exciting.
I know, it's so good to have you here. And actually, I always start when I have guests on the potty by just sharing how we met. A really frequent question I get from my audience is, how do I meet new people and how do I build new relationships as an adult? And so it's just a little snippet that I feel like is always very interesting for my audience. And I feel like I think that we first met or we first connected because you reached out to me, probably.
Yeah, I feel like, because I had you on my podcast, but I almost want to say a year ago, but I don't know if that's being generous.
More, I reckon.
You reckon? Yeah, I feel like it was ages ago, and I would have just come through Toby stuff, so through CFS Health, and gone, this woman looks amazing, stalked you on socials and gone, got to have her on the podcast. And I actually reckon that's how I meet the most amazing practitioners. Like, I think of Siggy and I think of some of these other beautiful women who you meet kind of in this business space, and then you meet them in real life, and it's weird because you've met online ages ago and you're like, hey, I actually do really like you. Like, even though we just had an hour talking, and then you meet them in person and you're like, they're one of my people as well. This is great.
Yeah. Definitely one of the most unexpected and most rewarding parts of starting a business for me was just like instant connections and community and collaborating, which is phenomenal. And so, I was living on the farm when I was on your podcast in Byron. So it would have been 18 months ago, I reckon, at least. Probably around 18 months ago.
Yeah, but then the funny thing is we have had no contact, really. I feel like not until I bumped into you in Sunny. I was going to say, and I didn't recognize
you. Yeah. So I met your mum at Blues Fest, maybe not that long. Definitely not that long after I'd been on the potty, because the floods came through Byron. I'd relocated to Brisbane. And then, I remember sitting in a tent at Byron Blues Fest eating lunch, and somehow we figured out that she was your mum and you were her daughter. And I was like,
So random, because I think mum said something. She was like, I met Gemma, and my brain just went, I don't know a Gemma. I just compartmentalize that kind of thing. And then she was like, Toby's Gemma in a sense. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, seeing you in the coffee shop, and I did not even twig. Like, I feel like you just don't know till you meet someone. But then I guess being in Coolum and Sunny Coast, you bump into people.
So small. I feel like I would see your mum once a week at the coffee shop.
Yeah. It's the best part about a small community, though. Like, I feel like you miss that, especially coming from living in Perth for a while or bigger cities and stuff, and then you move into a small town feel, like it's not a small town, but that small town feel, and you all of a sudden, your friends are your people, and then they become business colleagues, and then you do amazing things together.
Yeah, it's good fun, that is for sure. And so, yeah, it was awesome to reconnect. And something else that I do when I have guests on the podcast, I didn't tell you about this part, but I also reflect what I love about them. And one of the things that I love about you, and I get to receive from you every time we connect, is your adventurous spirit. And I feel like you have so much up and go and energy, and you're just popping all the time. And also your passion behind what you teach, I just love, and is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you here for this conversation we're going to dive into as well.
I feel like passion comes from experiences, right? Like, and you're the same with what you do. And the women I know who are sort of, I don't want to use the word the best, but are making a big impact and really changing lives. I feel like they really have this drive because they've walked the walk, or they've done the thing, or they've experienced it, or the family has, or whatever. And you're just like, and especially with women's health, I'm like, you're so just want to call bullshit on it, right? Because there's just so many things. And then people like you or me become more empowered, and we go, yeah, like that's IBS, that's bullshit, there's root causes for it. But the other 99% of women in the world don't even know that. And then I get so caught up in thinking everyone knows this, like this is just common knowledge. And then every day you're getting DMs from women who are like, oh, like, is that not normal? Like, I didn't know that. Is one bowel movement a week not normal? And it kind of pulls me back and regrounds me and go, people don't know. The general consensus is people don't know this stuff, which just seems overwhelming.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more that that's where passion comes from. I think it's individuals that have had an experience where they thought something was true, and they've uncovered that, yeah, it was absolute bullshit. And so your version of that is IBS. My version of that is that emotions are weak or disempowering or unintelligent. And and what you've shared just so beautifully depicts how much you do walk the talk when it's now your reality. You don't even know that there's anything other than what you teach and what you believe in and how you live your life. And then, we get to face into a world where women are still living in the pain of not realizing they've been fed a lie, or they don't have the information they need to feel good. And so
I think you forget what people's standard of feeling good is as well, right?
Yes.
Like, eat a bit of gluten accidentally and I get constipated for a couple of days. I'm a horrible person to be around because I'm so grumpy, because my standard for living is up here. Like, if I'm not having regular bowel movements and, am not bloated and gassy and stuff, I generally feel pretty good. And then I have this short, quote unquote, relapse of symptoms because something unintentional. And I'm like, that's right. People are living like this every single day, and that is their reality, and that is their normal. And often they don't even realize how much better they can feel. Like, to me, that's just wild.
Yeah. Incredible. And maybe even don't even have the reference point if you ask the question of, like, what are your bowel movements like? How frequent are your bowel movements? What time of day? They wouldn't even have the connection to themselves and their body to be able to immediately answer that as a feedback tool, which I'm sure we're going to get into as well. But before we do, I would just love for the women listening, can you tell me a little bit about your experience and what that was like for you, and how you find yourself so informed and so passionate here today, living this high standard of feeling good?
I think really, like, a lot of people think that maybe I grew up and sort of had maybe an unhealthy life or something like that, and that's why I ended up with sort of 10 years of symptoms. But I was one of those, like, very blessed people who grew up rural, grew up outside, surfing, skateboarding, eating fresh fruit and veggies, had the best childhood, camping, doing all the things I love doing, especially growing up, down south in Western Australia, and yet access to outdoor living is incredible. So I grew up really healthy. And then it wasn't only till really I hit 18 and I sort of started understanding that I was a real stressor, and I got put on the birth control pill for acne and things because I was just like this real A type. And then that was sort of my introduction in the terms of, okay, the pill, you know, is it good for me? Is it not? I put on a lot of weight from it. I was really sort of craved sugar and hormonal and just moody and stuff. So when offered again, was kind of like, there's something going on here, but there was no information around it because this is 10 years ago. Then I was just kind of struggling with those symptoms, went overseas to Bali. That was my second or third trip over there. Classic Bali belly, but really, really bad. Came back, had a lot of bloating, gassiness, constipation. I then developed glandular fever a couple of weeks later. So I don't know what the link, or I didn't know the link at the time, but now I was kind of like, oh, immune was stuffed because I was fighting all these gut bugs. I had retrospectively, I had SIBO, I had parasites, candida, all that stuff, which would have downplayed immune system, Epstein-Barr virus, all these things. Anyway, so got really unwell for so many weeks. And then after that point, when I sort of started recovering from the glandular fever, my body wasn't the same. And I always look back and go, that was a pinpoint moment for me. From that point, I was never the same again. So I lost my periods for 7 years. My stress and the way I responded to stress increased significantly. I could not handle any level of stress, and I was an A type. I got ducks at university, like I was top of the class, like I was go I was trying to push through CrossFit. I was really push my perfectionist traits out through my body image. So it was under eating, all those kinds of things, plus, you know, 1 bowel movement a week, severe bloating, severe skin issues, psoriasis, all this stuff. So it was just this big mess of symptoms without the answers. And I think at the time that was really, really hard because there was no education, awareness and support and things around it. And gut health was so nuanced then. Like it wasn't nothing like it is now. So
I know. It was so challenging back then.
So challenging. And I just feel like there wasn't that same push for things. So by the time I had done sports science, masters of nutrition, I still had all these symptoms, all this gut pain, obviously no periods, all that kind of stuff. Then came across functional diagnostic nutrition. It was just by chance. I think I met someone and they're like, have you done a microbiome test? I was like, what? And then that kind of, I say to people, that's when things changed. I went down the functional nutrition route. I did the testing on myself, did stool testing, did SIBO testing, did Dutch comprehensive hormone testing, and actually got answers after having 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of people telling me you're fine, you're healthy, you're well, and me going, I'm absolutely not. I'm early 20s, I have no period, I'm exhausted and I can't poo. Like I feel like that is not normal. So yeah, then getting those answers took another 5 or 6 years to really heal myself and then sort of understand that, hey, there's root causes for these symptoms. It's not, nothing's in isolation.
Yeah. Wow. You said 7 years you lost your bleed for. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And do you know what? Because the diagnosis at first was PCOS, but my blood sugars were fine. I had high androgens, but when we sort of looked at my insulin, I'm like, I'm not insulin resistant. I didn't have some of the symptoms. Like I never struggled with weight gain. I never had male hair growth, but I had the acne and the irregular period and the high androgens. No cysts on my ovaries. So they were kind of like, don't really know. And then they went, oh, maybe it's just amenorrhea. But the treatment for amenorrhea is very different to PCOS, because PCOS, they're thinking carb reduction because there's an insulin issue. Amenorrhea, you're just not eating enough food, damn it. So it was like, eat more carbs. And then I started, when I looked into it, I went, you know what? It's actually adrenal PCOS. So, and same now, when my adrenal function goes AWOL, like my cortisol was through the roof, then your androgens go up retrospectively as well. And that's when I lose my period. So Bali last year, I went to Bali for a couple months. I got really unwell and I lost my period again because I was so stressed from being so sick. So similar things now, like if I eat enough carbohydrates, manage my stress levels, don't over-exercise, so don't run or mountain bike ride too much, then my acne stays fine and all those kinds of things. My period stays regular. But as soon as there's a shift into that stress mode, whether that's family, life, those kinds of things, usually work's the big driver. Then you see that shift. So it's just it's a knowledge thing, a treatment and knowledge thing.
Phenomenal. I think there's just a whole other level of trust when you work with practitioners who have actually lived it and have created the example or the existence that you're after.
Yeah, because I think the biggest issue for me at the time was, like you said, not having someone to trust, because people didn't recognize and understand your symptoms. And they said, well, if it's constipation, eat more fiber and exercise more. And that was not my issue. And it's like, if you don't have a period, go on the birth control pill. And I was like, but that doesn't, and that was ill-informed me even then, going, that doesn't seem right, because what if I want to have kids one day? And they just went, well, you probably won't. Like, that's you're probably not going to have children. And in the early 20s, I was like, that just doesn't seem right. It's just,
I'm hearing two main things from you here. One is that you were really willing to trust your internal feeling and advocate for yourself. Would you say that feels true?
Yeah, 100%. I was like, if no one else is going to figure it out, I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is that you really began to understand the importance of actually fucking getting to the root of what's going on and stop treating the symptoms. And we can apply this to all areas of our life that we're experiencing pain, but especially health. If we keep band-aiding symptoms, or we don't go to the depths of actually gathering all the information we need to understand what is truly happening beneath the surface, it doesn't matter how well intended we are with the plan or the strategy we're using, it's unlikely it's going to be the right one.
Yeah, and I think because symptoms are so variable, right? And that can be with anything. Like, you could say, oh, I have IBS, but it could be bacterial stuff which is causing the IBS, but it could be that you're just anxious and you've got loose stools on that particular day because of your anxiety. And I see that all the time as well. Or you just drank too much lactose and your body can't handle that much lactose, and therefore you've got loose stools that day. So you're coming to me with a symptom where I go, well, that could be anything. Thyroid issues, fatigue, like it's like, well, and then people go and buy supplements for that one thing. And it's like, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know what you're treating?
Yeah, it's still that. And I was absolutely guilty of this. It's still that reaching for like, but I just want the quick fix and whatever magic pill it is. And like, I just want to know now, and I want it to be gone tomorrow. And it actually becomes the really long route when we repeat that quick fix over and over and over and over and over again. And it becomes so expensive as well.
Yeah. I feel like women go through that cycle and then they reach a point and they go, like, that's it. Like, you can kind of handle that cycle so many times, and then all of a sudden they get to a tipping point and then they're like, okay, help me.
Yeah. It's become painful enough that they're like, all right, whatever it takes, I surrender. I'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I love a woman who knows where she stands on topics that seem normal. Yeah. So we're going to dive into a conversation around IBS here. So seems normal that someone would just have IBS and it's popping up all the time, when in actual fact, whilst it's common, it's not actually normal. And so we're going to have this conversation where we expose IBS for what it is and call the bullshit on it. But before we do that, I think a good place for us to start is with a foundational understanding of what is the version of IBS that you can't stand for and that is not helpful or empowering for women to be living life, like from believing that that's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. I think the stem of it is that, one, doctors tell people IBS is genetic. So if you're struggling with constipation, loose stools, bloating, stomach pain, and you get to a point and you go, I don't know what to do, this doesn't actually really feel right, you go to your GP, because there's generally your first point of care. You go to a GP and you say, I've got constipation, loose stools, something doesn't feel right. I get pain when I eat. I react to a lot of foods. I can't pick a food trigger. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And my bloating's out of control. What is going on? They've got their 10 minutes, and generally, just generalizing here, but usually they would be like, you've got IBS, so you've got irritable bowel syndrome. So basically, your bowel is irritated. When you're putting food inside it, it's not happy. Therefore, it'll either go really fermenting gassy, which is giving you that bloating, or it's like, get rid of this ASAP, and it's giving you diarrhea, loose stools. There is pain around that as well, because there's usually inflammation around that because, again, your bowel is irritated. So that's the kind of explanation your GP will sort of give you up front. Generally, they will say either increase more fibre if it's a constipation dominant type of quote unquote IBS, drink more water, do more exercise, manage your stress. They're kind of their go-to on that side of things. And then it's like, you've got to manage this for life. Is there any family history of IBS? And note, people here, we're not talking about IBD. So irritable bowel disease is so different to IBS. You can have IBS symptoms, so let's say constipation, bloating, loose stools, and have a disease. But irritable bowel disease is a diagnosable autoimmune condition normally. So ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. For that stuff, you have a diagnosis. You can grab that diagnosis because you can say, I've got an autoimmune condition. This is a lifelong management. Autoimmune conditions can progress into other autoimmune conditions. Let's not flare up our autoimmune condition. IBS is not actually a diagnosis because it's a collection of symptoms. There's no, and PCOS is quite similar as well. It's generally a collection of symptoms that are driven by something being unhappy, an imbalance in the body. And I just think that's really frustrating for women, because then they walk out of their GP office going, okay, I've got constipation, loose stools, bloating. I've got this for life. I better go increase my fibre intake, which, note, is not always the issue and can aggravate certain gut conditions like SIBO. Drink more water, which most of them are drinking enough water, and most of them are doing some form of exercise. If you're not eating, drinking, exercising, obviously go do those things. But generally, you're sort of doing that stuff already and you're like, there's something else going on here. So you walk away uninformed, uneducated, looking for laxatives, or, you start Googling, really. You start going down that Googling route going, what do I do for this gut that's so unhappy? Or is this just my reality and my life from here on in?
So feeling probably pretty overwhelmed and pretty confused.
Very, very confused. I get a lot of messages from women saying, my doctor told me of IBS. I don't know what to do. Like, where do I go from here? And my knee-jerk reaction is just to be frustrated, because I'm like, you don't. You've got something else. I believe your symptoms, and I believe you're hurting, and I believe your frustration, but I don't believe that's a good enough diagnosis. I believe there's something else going on, and whether that's bacterial, parasitic, yeast-based, anxiety-type based, there's that strong gut-brain connection, or whether you've got a food allergy, something like that. I believe there is a reason that we can actually fix. Yes, I will rule out a medical diagnosis, and I will make sure we run the correct testing to identify inflammation levels and make sure there's not something more chronic going on. But even in that case, I've had 2 clients this week, and this drives me nuts. 2 this week, their stool tests have come back really high inflammation levels. So calprotectin, for anyone who's run a stool sample or been to your GP, calprotectin is the marker that's looking for inflammation. I've seen them extremely elevated, have sent them to their GP to try and get a gastrologist referral to run a colonoscopy, and their GP said, no, I don't believe this testing, and I'm not even going to run my own. I don't think it's an issue, which just blows my mind, because I'm still going to act as I would and reduce inflammation and do all the things and heal all the shit that's going on in their gut. But it's also like, my duty of care to you is to ensure that you don't have colon cancer, to rule out if you've got Crohn's, because that kind of stuff can be passed down, and to make sure we're treating you effectively, and to not have the support of someone's doctor in these cases to at least go, I don't believe her test, but I'll run my own and just to rule it out. Like, I just think that the duty of care to people seems to be missing now. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, something that I had to learn in my own health journey as well was how to take back my power and realize that when we walk into those doctors' offices, we're not sitting there waiting to be told what to do or be told what is wrong with us. It's actually, a gathering of information that we get to choose what we do with. And we also get to, tune inwards and be honest about, does this person feel like a fit for me? Do I feel supported here? Do I feel heard and listened to here? And if it's a no, you get to keep, looking until you find that GP or whatever type of practitioner it is, because it's not just with GPs, but until you do find that fit, because you're allowed to do that. And ultimately, the only person that is going to take care of yourself and knows what your body needs and what feels good and what feels right and can create these changes is ourselves. You mentioned when you were speaking before, Sheridan, and my ears pricked up because it was so true for me, food intolerances, food sensitivities, and, trying to, but maybe not even being able to pinpoint like what group or where that's coming from. I know in the past for me, like I also had the PCOS diagnosis. I did have SIBO, like Candida, pathogen, all of that overgrowth, huge problems with constipation, bloating, food sensitivities, to the point where, I had to start buying clothes that were like a whole dress size up because I was just in so much pain around my gut and they still needed to be loose fitting. And yeah, the food sensitivity piece for me, I got to the point where there was no gluten, there was no dairy, there was no sugar, there was no fructose, there were no grains, there was no histamines. And it was like, this is hard work. And I think a lot of women can feel like at that point that food is against them, like food is the problem, food is the enemy. And again, we're sitting at a symptom level. But yeah, what's your experience with that? And what would you say to someone who is focusing more on all the things that they can't eat or feeling really like defeated and trapped in that cycle?
Yeah, you're right. It does become this food fear. Like for women who've removed a lot of foods, and then I say to them, okay, we've done a couple months of gut healing work. You're actually going to be able to tolerate small amounts of, might be higher FODMAP foods. It might be a little bit of gluten, a really good quality form of sourdough, or it might be, a small amount of quality dairy. They have this initial, like, I don't want to do that. Like I'm scared to add that in because I know how much that reacts in my body. And we also can sometimes, and I hand on heart, I was really bad for this, is that I was like, no, I'm the healthy one. Like I only eat green things and like nuts and seeds. And now I look back and go, oh, Sheridan. But like, it was like, I don't eat gluten or dairy or any processed food ever, because this is my identity as the healthy person and this is who I am. Bear in mind, I have severe constipation and gut issues and no period and everything else, but I was like, but I'm the healthy person. So we have layers around it, and sometimes it's sort of the identity of who we think we are. Sometimes it's the fear of that negative reaction as well. So I feel like there's two things going on there. But my biggest thing, because a lot of GPs will also hand out the low FODMAP diet. So
I was on that for years.
Classic. Like I spoke to a woman yesterday who's been on it for 5 or 6 years, because as soon as she tries a little bit of onion or garlic or anything, lactose, anything that's slightly high FODMAP, severe reactions. And she's like, but that's how I live now. Like, and I'm like, what? Like, have you and again, their reality, my reality. I'm that far gone going, we do this, we go low FODMAP, we reintroduce the foods, and you eat a healthy, broad spectrum of foods again. Like that's kind of what I think is normal now. But of course, it's not normal. The normal thing is to remove these foods and never add them back in because you get symptoms from them. So I think there's that fear. We find something safe and then we don't want to add stuff in, but it's frustrating as a practitioner, because what happens, the more restricted we become, the less food our good bacteria have, the more they die off, and then all of a sudden your things like candida can keep growing. Your small intestinal bacteria overgrowth can go nuts. Your large intestinal bacteria overgrowth can grow because there's no comparison. And I say to people, it's like a garden. If you have a lot of weeds, the flowers can't grow. Whereas if you have a healthy like ecosystem, there might be a few weeds here and there, but they're never going to overpower all the good stuff that's growing. So it's finding that balance, but I understand it's scary to add stuff back in. But 99% of my clients, after they have done the removal work of whatever it might be, yeast, parasites, bacteria, have worked on starting, like not even 6 months down the track, just starting to add in prebiotics and probiotics, can start to increase their food diversity. A little bit of onion, a little bit of garlic, some of those high FODMAP fruits, just starting to slowly add dairy forms back in, maybe not lactose straight away, but they're broad, foods that are not giving them symptoms, just increases and increases as their gut heals. So it's never one food in isolation. It's a collection of things.
Yeah. And it blew my mind when I learned how to use food to heal, as opposed to putting things like antibiotics and even antimicrobials and really strong herbs into my body to like kill off. I was just blown away at how powerful food can be when it's done right and you have the right person supporting you and investigating and getting curious about your symptoms.
Well, GAPS is another classic one. I know we mentioned this the other day whenever we were talking about it, but you sort of talked about your GAPS journey and stuff, and just how, like, for anyone who doesn't know about GAPS, go Google it and buy the book because it's incredible. But that is like the epitome, I reckon, of using food to heal.
Yeah.
Like I know it's not always the right time and space for everyone, and we won't go into it, but there's so many factors around it, and you've really got to be committed and stuff. But if you were going to use food to heal, like solo food, I would say try your hand at GAPS.
Yeah. And for our listeners, GAPS stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome. It's a protocol. I'm actually 6 or 7 weeks into just a basic reset on GAPS at the moment. And it's been so cool to watch I'm barely supporting the detox of my body. Like the other night I was like, Gemma, you need to be taking magnesium like a little better. And like I've had maybe one detox bath a week, and all that has shown up is I've got like a little bit of eczema on my wrist and also on my eyelids. But in the past, when I did it to heal chronic fatigue, anxiety, depression, and all of my gut stuff, constipation, bloating, which I want to quickly ask you about next, the detox symptoms were just like large. And even also not having an understanding that is healing as well was super perplexing to me at the start. But yeah, contrasting that with where I'm at now and just doing this little reset, it's very, very cool. And so empowering to have this knowledge and to just be able to make, a few tweaks to your diet for a short period of time to just totally bolster your immunity and energy and hormones and my cycle. It's been incredible. But on bloating and constipation, can we talk? And I know it's probably a massive rabbit hole. We could do a whole podcast episode on it. But I would just love to hear from you some of these root causes around, what is stirring that up?
Yeah, constipation is one of my favorite things to carry on about because I'm just like, having a good poo is the best feeling in the world. And for people who are not having a nice form bowel movement 1 to 3 times a day, I'm like, you've really got to get on this bandwagon because it will change your life. But I think there's so much misconception about what's normal with the bowel movement. And even looking on the Bristol stool chart, like I show people sometimes, they're like, oh yeah, I've got little kangaroo pellets. That's what my poo's always like. Or other people going, it's always really soft, like super, super soft. And it's never a formed sausage-like stool. And I'm like, well, that's not normal. And, you should be able to have a poo without coffee. Like there's different things. Sure, that might be the habit that your body's fallen into now. So if you took the coffee away, you'd probably still have a poo, in the morning when you'd normally have it. But there's things that we start to just think of as normal, which aren't normal. And constipation, primarily at a base level, low fiber, low water, low movement. So if I go traveling overseas, I'm probably going to get slightly constipated because I'm sitting on a plane, I'm not eating properly and generally not drinking enough water, and I'm not moving at all. That's okay, because that's going to reset and be normal. What's not normal is that is your everyday, that you're kind of like, okay, I'm struggling to have a bowel movement every day, and you're doing those things. You move for 30 minutes a day, nothing crazy, you drink water and you eat vegetables and fruit. So if you're not doing those things, then I go, okay, next level, there's usually bloating involved as well, because when there's constipation, there's a lot of gas in the gut, so in the intestine, because food's fermenting. So things ferment when there's a bacterial imbalance normally, and it's not getting digested properly. So that can be upper digestion. So you're thinking about salivary enzymes, and whether you're breaking down your food properly, you're thinking stomach acid, you're thinking that sort of bile production, anything that's going to help break down that food, so that by the time we get to your small and large intestine, all we need to do is draw the nutrients out, form a stool and poo it out. So generally the top things I see is either low stomach acid, poor digestive enzyme production, and then imbalance of bacteria in either the small and or the large intestine. And that bacteria just ferments that food, gas, there's your bloating, all that gas in there slows down motility. So that are kind of your big sort of key cards around constipation. Sometimes it goes next level. If you've had food poisoning, your body's set off an immune response, and it can damage that migrating motor complex, which basically just tells your body to move through food through every 30 minutes or so. So sometimes it is a bit deeper. Sometimes there's structural things. If there's endometriosis, if there's extra tissues or things moving around, it'll definitely cause it. But I always tell people, baseline stuff first: move, drink water, eat enough fiber, track for a week on Chronometer or MyFitnessPal and just get an idea of how much fiber you're eating, and then kind of step it up and go, okay, I'm kind of doing all the things, which is primarily the women I'm working with are kind of switched on with this stuff. What's going on? And then we go microbiome testing. So stool test, see what's actually going in there, plus SIBO breath test. So look at that small intestine, run decent blood markers, look at B12, look at zinc, and start to understand if stomach acid is an issue, and then sort of start to work on those, what I call root causes around that. But the key one also is the anxiety mindset stuff, because the amount of women who get constipated when there's a fear or a busyness, and they don't have time to sit and relax and poo, that's a really big factor as well.
Absolutely. And I can still sometimes, in a really busy season of work, I'm like, hang on a minute. We need to put a buffer of 10 minutes in my morning. Because you just, it's that cycle of getting up out of bed and then just going. And especially if you're living a life where you're really excited and passionate and lit up by all of the things that you have that you want to experience throughout the day, 10 minutes can feel like a long time to have to like put between you and diving into those things. So I think they would be the big things I notice with people, and same with the bloating. And again, there's just lack of awareness around it. Like, I speak to people daily who struggle with bloating and constipation, and 90% of them have not heard about stool testing, and the 10% that have run a GP basic stool test, which for anyone listening is very different to the comprehensive microbiome mapping that a functional practitioner will run, because all the GP looks for is parasites and a couple bacteria. They don't look at digestive markers, enzymes, inflammation, leaky gut, all that other stuff that's going to give us a root cause picture. Amazing. I feel like we've covered so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in or talk about or share with the women listening?
No, I just want to circle back to your first point about information, like seeing a GP and walk in and take your power, and also take it on as just another step of the process. Never go to one person looking for all the answers. And that includes if you work with myself as well. I can't heal everything, and I won't, but I will be a stepping stone in your health journey, and I will help you with the testing and get some more answers and make progress and all those kinds of things. But I think every practitioner you get to work with is just telling you a little bit more. And yeah, there's going to be shitty GP experiences in there, and I've had hundreds of them, and you're going to waste money on them, but that's part of the learning curve and the process. Just print every blood test, maintain all your data, like keep everything, because it starts to add up and you start to become more empowered. You ask more questions, you buy more books, you question things. And I think that is the big thing. Like, never just take a diagnosis as a diagnosis. Just keep asking questions, because your health is going to change as well. What my health looks like now is not what it's going to look like in 5 years' time. It might be better, it might be worse, I don't know, but I'm collecting data, and data gives you answers, essentially.
Yeah. We're designed to be happy, and we're designed to thrive and be healthy. And it's just looking at what does my body need at any different point in time to support that to happen.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Where can our listeners find you, my love?
Favorite place would be Instagram, so Sheridan_functional nutrition. But I love having listeners jump and listen to the podcast, which I've said should be 2 with Jem. There'll be another one coming out in the next week or so with her on my podcast. So that's Empowered Hormones with Sheridan Decker. But that would be the best 2 spots, and just reach out and connect and ask questions, because I always just love hearing from people and sort of pointing you in the right direction of what to go get tested.
Incredible. I'm going to put those links in the show notes so it's super easy for the women to find you. Thank you so much for being here. Every time I speak to you, I realize even more how wise and how much wisdom you have to share. And I feel so grateful to have you in my life and a source I can just tap into. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here for this conversation, my love. If you would like more free resources, if you'd like to learn about my programs or coaching opportunities, you can find all of that information at my website, gemmahanley.com. I'll link it below in the show notes. And if you would like to connect daily, head over and find me on Instagram. My handle there is Gemma E. Hanley, and I reply to all of my DMs there personally. If you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please share it with someone. You never know who needs to hear one little thing to take their day from feeling stuck and heavy to light and free. See you on the next one.